Okay, so in order to make things a little bit clearer for you of how to build rows of blocks and also how to construct walls, I'm just going to take you through the steps of how to do some of the basics for that. Now, what I'd suggest you first do is turn on your X, Y, Z coordinates so that you can actually see where your different axes are. So right now as I'm walking around, it can be quite difficult to see, well, which value am I actually changing as I move around and go into a different location. So I'm going to press escape and go into my settings. And if I scroll down here, you'll see there's a little toggle switch that says show coordinates. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to get back into my game. And now in the upper left of my screen, you'll see that there are a couple of different sets of coordinates. One is for me and one is for my agent who's popped up because I've previously played with my code. Now, if I move along this axis here, you'll see that the third number on my coordinates are changing, and that's the only one that's changing. The third number is my Z axis. So if I was to turn 90 degrees, I could assume that as I move here, it'll be the first number that'll change, which it is. So that is my X axis. Now, if I was to fly up in the air, it's the middle number because up and down is my Y axis. Now, this is important to understand because when you're placing blocks down, you need to know the X, Y, Z of how to locate and orient things in this 3D environment. Okay, so I'm going to go into my code editor now because what we're going to do is put in the instructions in a loop in order to get a row of blocks to be placed along my x-axis. Okay, so we're not going to use this start, we'll drag that off. And we'll stick with this chat command, but we're going to change the wording for row. Okay, now I could put in a simple sequence of block place commands. So I'll put that in there. And I'll change my material. Let's go oak wood planks. Now, if I was to play or type in row now, it would try and place this block at exactly my coordinates because this little squiggle line, which is called a tilde, that means it's relative to where my player is. Now, I actually wanted to place it off to the side, so I'm going to change this to a 5. And now if I go into my world, into my T for talk or my chat window, okay, if I type in row and press enter, there should be, there we go, on my Z. So I'm here, my Z axis goes here, right through me onto this side, and there's that block. Now that's not that useful for me right now. All right, so I'm gonna have to go back into my coding and do a little bit more work in here. Okay, so we want this to repeat, and so I'm going to use a loop. If I click on here, there are a bunch of different types of loops. Be careful of using a forever, especially if you're trying to place TNT blocks that you want to blow up, because if you've got lots of the same thing happening again and again, your computer can get quite glitchy. It's good for there to be a case where a loop actually stops. So we're going to use one of these 4 commands, and I'm going to place my block place command inside that. Now, it creates a variable. Now, if you don't understand what a variable is, you need to go back and watch the previous movie that was made available for you that introduced variables and loops and had a slight introduction to methods in it, which will take you through that. But I don't want to use index. I'm going to create my own. So I go into variables, and you can see index is already listed there. I'm going to create one, and I'm going to call it row number. Now the standard thing is if it's multiple words that you're using in a variable name, you don't have a space, but every word after the first has a uppercase capital letter to make it a little bit easier to understand and to read. So I'm going to click OK, and I've now got row number there. So I'm going to click and drag that, and I'm going to replace it over my index. Okay, so in this case, this loop is going to repeat 5 times because you can see at the start it's got 4 row number from 0 to 4. So that essentially puts the value of 0 into my row number, and then it's going to do whatever is in this loop once. Then it'll go back to my loop at the start there. It'll increase the number by 1, and it'll do my instructions inside the loop again, and then it'll keep on doing that until it gets to 4. And when it gets to 4, it'll do it one more time, and then it'll stop. Now, in this situation, all this is going to do is place this block over the top of itself 5 times, so you won't actually notice anything changing. What we can do is go back into my variables again, go into my row number, and I can drag that and place that on my X value. So what this is going to do now is it will place a block initially. When it's 0, it'll place the block exactly where I am at the same location as far as the height, but 5 blocks off to the side. Then it'll go through and do the next loop of this. Row number will increase to 1. So the next time it'll place a block, it'll be at 105, and then it'll go through it again. It'll be 205. It'll go through it again, 305, and the last time when this increases to 4, that will then be 405. At that point, it'll stop doing this and it will exit out. So what we're going to do now is try and run this. Now, because I'm recording the video footage of this at the same time, sometimes it can get a little bit glitchy and it doesn't like working that well for me. So we'll try it. Hopefully it works okay. So I'm going to click over here. I'm going to go into my chat window. I'll put in the command of row, and I'll look out the side here, and there you go. We've got that. If I move so I can actually see this happening, I'll shift up here a little bit because it's all relative to where my player is. And I'm going to type in that command again. There you go. You can see it building. And it's very slow because of the demands my CPU is going under at the moment. It's really struggling. Okay, so we've now got the basics of how to do a row. And if we wanted to customize that a little bit, I could go back into my code window. We could change any of these values around. If we didn't want this to start at 0, if we wanted to start, say, at the number 3 instead, so the first time it placed it, it was 305, and then it became 405, what you could do is you can bring some maths into the equation. If I click on this, you'll see we've got a whole bunch of different operations here. Now, I'm going to click and drag, or if it works, click and drag this and replace my row number here, and then I'm going to get my row number, and I'm going to put that over the top of this one and let go. What this now allows me to do is to add another number onto my row number every time this loop occurs. So when it's initially 0, I could type in the number 3 here. So the first time it actually places this block, it'll be at 3 for my x value. The next time, when this is increased from 0 to 1, it would then go to here, and it would make this worth 4. So it would do exactly the same as what it did last time, except everything is offset by 3 extra blocks. So, just to keep things simple, and you can try this out yourself to make sure this works, but I want to keep things as simple as possible right now before we get any further. I'm going to drag that back to where it was. Okay, so here we had the basics of how to do a row. Now, the next thing is how do we turn this into a wall? And the easiest way to do that is to get another loop, drag that in. I'm going to drag that up here, and I'm going to drag this one, which does all of the rows, inside this one. Now, this for loop that I've got highlighted at the moment, that was responsible for changing the X coordinate every time a block was placed. Now, this one up here that I've now got highlighted, that's going to be changing the Y coordinate, or the Y, or the row height. So let's create a new variable that's descriptive, and we'll call it that. So row height. We've now got that there. We click and drag that, and we'll place the index. Okay, so row height, and let's make this one do it 3 times. So we'll set this value to 2. So it'll go 0, 1, and 2, and then it'll exit. Now, it's going to initially do this for loop. That will be 0, and then it will go into this for loop, and this one of row number will start at 0 as well. You've got the 0 value that gets used here, and we want the Y value of row height to be used here. So we're going to click and drag that one in there. So the first place command is going to be 0, 0, and what you can't see off the screen right now is 5. Now it'll go through and it will keep on repeating this for loop, just like we had with the row last time, where the row number will increase every time, but the row height will still be at 0. As soon as it's done all 5 iterations of this, it's gone through and it's placed 5 blocks, it will then go back to this for loop because it's only done this once, and it will increase the row height value to 1. Then it'll go back to this one, and it will do the same thing. It'll place another row down, but this time it'll go from 0 to 4 for this value, but row height this time will be worth 1. And it will place that until it's got all of those different layers of rows up on the screen. So let's go into our code editor now, well, not code editor, into our world, and let's test this out. Let me just check. I think I still had that called row, so let's change this to being wall. And then I'm going to type in that command. You can see it's building it. And there we go. There's our wall. I don't know what happened there, or the sand suddenly fell away, but that's a separate thing entirely. Okay, so we've got all the basic commands of doing both a row and a wall. So try that out on yours if you've been finding that tricky. Another question that I've been getting quite a bit of is, how do you then turn this, if you've got one wall going along your x-axis, how do you then make it so it goes along your z-axis so that you get the perpendicular or 90-degree wall happening? So if I go back into here, and I'll move along a little bit, we've been playing with the x and the y values. You'd be doing a similar thing, but instead of the x, you'd be dragging this one and you'd be doing it on the z. So you're moving along the z-axis instead. Now you have to experiment with what your numbers are going to be that you leave in there, but that is the quickest way that you can get two different walls that are going at two different angles to each other. And that's going to get you a decent start on this if you can follow through with that. Okay, so let me know if you've got any questions through the inbox or through the discussion, and hopefully this helps you get a bit more of your house task done.